Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to another episode of On the Couch with Creatives. I say good morning because I'm here in the UK, but good afternoon or good evening if you're anywhere else in the world. I'm Melanie Perry.
I'm Julie Hadmew.
And this is On the Couch with Creatives. Fans and followers of the show will know that we're part of the Creatives Group, the professional network for people in the creative industries across the globe. Together, we help connect you, create and develop your creative business. But this is On the Couch. So Julie, who do we have on the couch today?
Well, today we are talking to someone who has a lot of arrows to his bow. He's a radio presenter, a magazine columnist, a voiceover artist and an actor. And his name is Nick Field. Hello, Nick. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, how are we doing?
Well, it's so nice to see you. Let's start off, Nick, with, you're just all everywhere, aren't you? So
yeah, basically.
Let's start off with how you first became a radio presenter.
Well, it was back in 2006. I'd wanted to be a radio presenter. Back in like the late 90s when, we didn't have YouTube, Spotify, everything like that. I was really into like discovering music. I spent all my money on cassettes by artists I liked and CDs later on. So back then, when we didn't have things like YouTube, Spotify, the main way that you found out about new music was through the late night shows on Radio 1. So I used to listen to a lot of those shows. I listened to Steve Lamacq and John Peel and Mary Ann Hobbs and all of those. And that really got me into finding out about new music and I wanted to be get into radio myself. So it was in 2006 that I heard about a radio station called Phoenix FM, which had been broadcasting. They'd done a series of 28-day broadcasts for the last 10 years and had just been given a full-time license and were looking for people to train up as presenters for when they launched full-time. And so I got in touch with them that way. I got invited to a few new presenter meetings where I just kind of talked endlessly about music that interested me. And it kind of just went from there. I did a couple of podcasts, which are still floating around on the internet. I probably sound very nervous on those and fall over my words even more than I do now. I was offered a spot on the station when it launched full time.
You have to have a gift of the gab to be a presenter on radio, don't you?
Definitely. You need to, definitely. You don't necessarily have to be kind of like a big expert on what's going on, but you need to have lots of enthusiasm. I was really fortunate in that as well as finding out about new music that really interested me, and I could talk about that with a degree of enthusiasm. I also had lots of friends who were in bands at the time, so it was really easy to get people in on the show and have guests, live sessions, and things like that. So it worked really well. A lot of things sort of like fell together really well. I had like loads of guests in, and everything just flowed really well. And there were always like gigs to talk about as well, which gave me good incentive to play other acts. So I wasn't just like pulling 2 hours of music out of the air, which is not an easy task, believe me. But so I was able to find like music to play and guests to get in, and it really worked well, and I was doing exactly the kind of show that I'd always wanted to do. So obviously this was 16 years ago, so we're talking around 2006, 2007. So this was before kind of like the idea of podcasting and the like really took off. But I like to think that it's given me a lot of capabilities where I can talk about that to people when they're doing podcasts. And I've seen the world of radio and the like change so much in a decade and a half. It's really quite something.
Yeah. Well, it snowballed, didn't it? Because you started off with a weekly music show, and then you were given the breakfast and the drive time, home time slots as well.
Yeah, because I ended up covering a lot of those slots as well, which was really interesting because it was like, because that's kind of, they're seen as like radio stations' flagship shows. I'll be honest with you, I struggled more in them because where I was playing my own music that I knew lots about and was able to tell people about, all of a sudden I was playing music that I hadn't personally chosen myself. It was by a computer. And so I I sort of had to work around that. So what I found myself doing, I mean, the thing is a lot of the time you're reading out entertainment news, you're reading out traffic. That was quite an experience first time. That was I felt a lot of pressure doing things like traffic news because that's very important. It sounds odd, but yeah, you've got to deliver that right for people who are listening. So what I found was when I was playing songs, I was looking up information on artists, and I was talking about when I first heard particular songs, and like my memories of tracks that I was playing for the older ones. So yeah, so it's very different. I mean, the thing is, there's lots of different types of DJ. You've got your personality DJs, muso DJs. I definitely fall into the latter category with those. So you've kind of got to work out where you fit in the radio world. I mean, I don't necessarily pay a lot of attention to like showbiz news and things like that, but that kind of works quite well if you're a breakfast show DJ or a drive time DJ. I think that there's a lot more pressure to keep up with popular culture. So that was something I was learning to do for the first time, really, but it was a really interesting experience.
Yeah, it is. I remember when I had my show on radio, the one thing that used to, because I had a sports show, and one thing that used to freak me out, like really freak me out, is the timings and make sure that it was a clear lead into the news, because when the news comes in, that's it, you know. And
absolutely.
And I always managed it, but that was the one thing that would break me out into a cold sweat. I'll be looking at the clock and thinking, oh, I got to press a button, I got to press a button. So I can relate to you doing the whole traffic. You know, I never wanted to get involved with that. I just wanted to talk about all the stuff that I loved and had some great guests on my show. But absolutely. It was that news button. It was like, oh my God, it's like the red nuclear button. If you miss it, oh my God.
Yes. Well, I started off as a radio newsreader. And I still, to this day, and I mean, it was years ago, to this day, I will still have nightmares about missing, you know, I'll see that second hand moving and I miss it and I can't get on air and there's dead air. That's the worst thing, dead air.
Yes. Yeah, because every so often you'll be talking about something really enthusiastically and suddenly it just kind of drops. It's just like, what was I going to say next? And suddenly then suddenly there's that, and you just... But yeah, I've kind of learned to style things like that out. So if I suddenly like lose track of what I'm talking about, which sounds ridiculous, but when you're in the radio world, it does happen a lot. And I learned, sorry, I'll start that again. And yes, so styling it out, it's a skill that everyone in radio needs to learn.
Absolutely.
I got thrown off though. I swore on air inadvertently. I know, it's a no-no. And I didn't just swear, I blasphemed. And I'd never used such an oath in my life before. And I had an engineer, I had a sound engineer, I wasn't driving the studio myself. And I said to him, cut the mic because I needed to cough. And he gave me the thumbs up. And I coughed and I coughed and I coughed. And I sat back and I said, Jesus Christ. And his eyes just opened wide and he went, and I thought he was waving at me, and I waved back, and the next minute I realized the red light was on and I was on air. And I carried on, and then I came off air, and immediately the door opened and the station manager walked in. He said, you're off air. And the next day, I was so lucky, the next day a television presenter said the F word. And of course, the whole country was up in uproar. How dare he?
I can imagine,
It saved me because the station manager, I phoned him up immediately. I said, come on, I've never said the F word. And he said, okay, get back on air.
Yeah, I think ultimately, if something like that happens, then you have to immediately apologize. I've never done it myself, because I heard a bunch of horror stories from someone just before I started, from someone saying that. But I've But yes, if someone does that, then you just have to apologize immediately and move on.
Well, I learned very quickly that you should always, always consider, whether you're in radio or television, always consider the mic live. Always.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you progress, Nick, sort of from radio, and you went into magazine editing for a while, and then you're sort of transitioning out into an actor. So how did you kind of how did your life roll from one to the other?
Yeah, we ended up doing lots of different things. I mean, the radio station, we covered lots of events, we covered festivals, we put on lots of our own gigs. So we were doing kind of like lots of like live reporting. I was offered the chance to be a magazine columnist for a listings publication called Essex Gig Guide. As that's where we were all based, and so I did that was for about a year that I did that. It was a monthly column that I did, and I was just asked that by one of the people that I'd interviewed recently. So yeah, but that was a really interesting experience. It was kind of something I thought a lot about, kind of like journalism and things like that. That kind of did interest me, although keeping up with everything going on is very hard work. So I did that for a while. So I did kind of like lots of reporting from events. I did the magazine column for Essex Gig Guide, and it was around 2014. I had lots of people asking me, "Oh, do you want to move up into, do you want to go and be on Radio 1 or something like that? Am I going to be taking over from Chris Moores at some point?" To be honest with you, I wouldn't. Those kind of slots, doing those kind of the kind of shows that I'd be doing, I think I'd be struggling with a lot more. And the trouble is, there's very few opportunities to move up in radio. Even with kind of like the bigger local stations, like the BBC local stations, it's difficult to sort of move up into those. So that was when I started looking at diversifying. And in this industry, you had to be diverse and have a few different skills. So then I started looking into voiceover. It was an idea that I'd entertained for a long time. I kind of had because I've pretty much always sounded like this. My mum insisted that my sisters and I spoke the Queen's English, and I've also inherited a loud voice from my dad. Everyone down the pub can always hear what he's saying all the time. So it kind of gave a bit of, I need to make use of this, because I was like, I genuinely do think that I have something to offer. I think the fact that I grew up in the 90s as well, when every advert sounded like this. And yeah, I sound like this all the time. This isn't put on, you can imagine how hilarious I am on Saturday night. So I started looking into that. I looked up various kind of like getting your first voiceover reel, and I came across a website called VO Masterclass, which is hosted by Gary Terza, who used to be a continuity announcer for Channel 4. He's been in the industry for years. And I got in touch with him. We had a few emails back and forth. We had a Skype session where I read some sessions with him. He's really, really good at training people up to be voiceovers who haven't done a lot of prior voiceover experience. So he was a really good one to go with, and I got a really good deal with him on producing a show reel and also having a year's mentoring with him. So it was through him that I got my first show reel done, and I also got registered on a few voiceover audition sites, which are really kind of like your first port of call when you're starting out and you've got your show reel. So you put your show reel up on there. A lot of the time you're recording auditions. So it's kind of moving forward like that. I mean, I look back at some of the first recordings that I made at home, and yeah, I definitely wasn't going to get hired for any of those. But then I started looking at the freelancer sites as well, such as Fiverr and the like, and put my reels up on those. And then I started getting people asking me for work there as well. So, and that sort of like went moved forward at a reasonable rate. You know, I was getting bits and bobs of jobs to do, and really enjoyed it. You know, the great thing with voiceover is you get a different script every time, and every advert you do is a bit different. So yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And I got, in terms of equipment, a USB microphone. I'm pretty sure they have come down in price over the years, and a duvet over my head, which I still use a lot now. You know, incredibly simple setup, but no one's ever complained about the sound quality. So there you go.
And
every voiceover artist that we've spoken to says they've started off with a duvet over their heads, or they've turned over a sofa just to get their little boost. But eventually, obviously, when the work comes in and the money comes in, you upgrade to a proper sound boost. But you've been in a lot of commercials, haven't you?
I've done tons of them. It's mostly it's adverts. Mainly, you work with video production companies, animators, designers, and it's often for kind of like up and coming companies, many of whom are getting their first advert, and I just find that such a joy, because you're helping someone sort of like move up the ladder. I kind of see it as a bit how when I was interviewing like local bands on the radio, you know, none of them have done radio before, so this is like a real event for them. So helping a company kind of like move up and promote themselves better online is just such a it's such a joy. You know, it really is.
It is, and getting a professional voiceover to voice over your advert does put you on that next level. No matter what anybody says, it does. You raise the bar when you can afford to do a professional voiceover. I mean, I run my own video production company, and I always encourage clients to not voice it themselves, but just to spend that little bit of extra money and get a professional in, because it makes all the difference. It really, really does.
Exactly.
And you've gone through your radio that's morphed to voiceover, and you're also now moving more into acting as well. And tell us about that, because a lot of voiceover artists that I know are quite happy to stay behind the microphone and in their booth, but coming out in front of the camera is actually quite a big step. So how did you transition from one to the other? Because I'd be very interested to find out more about that.
I kind of fell into it. But again, it was one of those ideas that I'd entertained. You know, I quite liked the idea of being an actor when I was a kid, but I sort of put it off for a long time. But when one of the sites that I signed up to, looking for voiceover auditions, also had bits of acting and extra work, and I thought, oh, I'll just put myself forward for this as well, do some networking, and when I go there, say to them, you know, do you need a voiceover artist? Here's my card. That was kind of the main thinking about it. But yeah, kind of like as I evolved over time, it was really interesting. You know, I did a couple of student films and the thing that I really liked about it is it meant I had a time where I was trying to be something other than voiceover man. A lot of the time, they kind of discourage people from being kind of like voiceover man, voiceover woman. But my trouble is that is who I am. I am voiceover man. You know, it's like that's my voice is kind of like formulated for that. So it was kind of good to go and do something that's more conversational and yeah, just trying to kind of like and I genuinely think that acting has helped me diversify more as a voiceover artist as well. Because I think when I'm doing voiceovers, it's very easy to sort of lapse into talk like you're promoting something. So it's so I do think so. Acting has helped me basically. It's improved my range a lot. I do think.
Yeah,
but it's very different because when you're voicing an advert or whatever, you have a script right in front of you, and as you say, you're trying to sell something or rouse your audience. But when you're acting, you actually have to pretend to be a human being.
Yes. Yeah, and it's a really interesting challenge. You know, it's a bit. You know, it's like every time I'm on set, it feels like a journey to another world, and yeah, that's what really interests me about it.
And you've got the couple of films that you've been in are on Amazon Prime at the moment, aren't they? So talk us through that, because I think one's just won an award as well. Tell us what you were in those films.
The first couple of films I was in, the first one was a comedy drama called Calamity Kevin. I was originally going to go for an inspector part, but ended up being part of playing a big boss role, which was really interesting. That came out in 2019, and it was also in 2019 another film that I was in called The Viking War, which was a really bizarre film. And one of the producers for that has also worked on Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, which came out recently. For this particular film, I had to wear a bunch of clay, mascara, and fake blood on my face. I was playing a member of an evil tribe. I look absolutely ridiculous, but I had a fantastic few days filming, so heck. And so those came out in 2019, and in terms of more recent ones, I ended up working with another actor who came from the same town as me, and a crew that he regularly works with. So we were doing a couple of locally filmed ones. One of them came out last year called Connie Lynn. That's the one that's just won an international film award at a film award in Italy for Best Original Film at the 8.5 Film Awards. It just won Best Original Film, which is fantastic. That one is really interesting because the script is AI generated. So that was really interesting. So it's part AI generated and part improv. So yeah, so everything in that film is part AI with some improv thrown in. So that was really fascinating. And I'm really proud of that performance. I play a psychiatrist in that one. And that feels like my most naturalistic performance. You know, there was one point where we did about a half-hour take straight for that one. And we just kept going. And that one was really good fun because it just kind of felt so natural. You know, it's like where I've worked in education a lot, and you've sometimes been a shoulder to cry on and stuff. So that role came really naturally to me. So I'm really pleased that that film's done so well. And another film I was in, the director that I worked with on Calamity Kevin, which was originally filmed back in 2017. So this was maybe like a couple of years into my acting career, and after doing lots of student films and random and bits of extra work. That was when I got into. So it was great to go back and work with him. It was just a small role playing a solicitor, but that was probably like the first big job I had after the second lockdown. And there was another film I did called World Cup Heist, which I think was done between the two lockdowns. Yeah, I've been really fortunate with the crews that I've had. They've invited me back to do more filming with them, which is brilliant. And ultimately, if you turn up on set and you're good to work with, you will be invited back.
Yeah, absolutely. If you could play any role in any kind of a film, what would your dream role be?
You know what? I love comedy. I love the idea of making people laugh. So if I could have, a fun sitcom role would be fantastic for me. I mean, so maybe just like maybe like a role in Blackadder or something like that. I could do a big posh type, something like that. You know, so that would probably something like that would interest me.
Lovely. So, with all your oodles and oodles of experience that you've had over the years, what would your, say, top 3 tips be for anybody who is aspiring to, either go into radio or perhaps acting, or voiceover?
Righto. So yeah. So if I were to do one tip for each that I would go back and tell myself: for voiceover, download scripts and practice. Make sure that's the one thing that I would say to myself. I would have gone back, downloaded more scripts and practiced, because I genuinely think that will just make everything flow. Because the thing is, when you're reading scripts, you're not gonna. I mean, if you can memorize them, well done. But most of the time, you won't have time to do that. So I would say download some scripts. Get into the habit of sight reading. So you've got go through it a few times and be able to read the next thing without stumbling. So, because that is a real skill. It's like I think a lot of people do struggle with that, and I think a lot of people struggle to read aloud. For me, it was something that I was actually able to do. I found that I was able to read things and put expression into them. That came quite easy for me. I remember once reading a story in school once, and I found that I was able to read along with it quite quickly, but also put expression into it. That came quite naturally to me. It might take more practice with other people, but it's 100% worth it. You'll sound so much better. I would also say try and work out where you fit in the voiceover industry as well, whether it's audiobooks, whether it's commercials, whether it's company reads, whether it's whether it's character roles, because there's lots of different types. There's different types that require different things of you. So that would be my tip for voiceover. For radio, I would say think about the kind of show that you want to do, and think about the stories that you can tell, and try and bring enthusiasm to that. I think the thing with radio is it's not just you sat there playing a bit of music. You've got to try and engage the audience as well. So I would say work on things like stories you can tell, and it's I mean, obviously it's a lot easier with radio now because podcasts are such a thing, but I would say if you've got the stories, make sure you can tell them. So think about that as well, and think about people that you can interview as well. It's not just you playing your record collection. It's not just you. Like I say, it's not just you playing your record collection and expect people to be engaged. You've got to make sure that you've got an engaging show that people can watch. In terms of acting, I would say take opportunities as they come, and don't think of yourself as above something. I learned so much from student films, from local filmmakers. I mean, I've worked a lot with people who are just filming stuff on their phones, and I mean, some of them can get quite odd and random at times, but that, just see that as a bit of free acting practice. You don't have to go to drama school. If you want to, you can. If you can afford to, then why not? But also get yourself clued up on the business of the business as well. I mean, there's a community called Act On This, which I work with very closely, who talk a lot about kind of like the business side of being an actor and getting yourself seen by agents and casting directors and the like. So I would say get yourself clued up on that as well. The Meisner technique, great, but you also need to think of yourself as someone who's running a business as well. And a lot of people will say in this industry, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I agree with that to an extent, but at the same time, I always say, who you know gets you up the ladder. What you know keeps you up there. I think that's such an important phrase. It's because ultimately, if you know your stuff and you're good to work with and you're nice to everyone, remember, the runners you work with today are the directors of tomorrow. And if you're a pain to work with on set, they'll remember that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It was always told me when I started my radio and then television career, right from the beginning, I was told, be careful, don't kick people when you're going up, because they're the people who are going to kick you when you fall down.
Yes.
And hopefully I've never been really nasty to anybody I've worked with, but I've always been very aware that you need to treat people with respect, absolutely, professionally.
Yeah, and some people do forget that in the media industries and film industries.
So true.
Some of the higher ups, and hopefully that is starting to change a little bit, because you do get much more out of your cast and crew if you create a nice environment to film in. And the multi-award winning Ozark with Jason Bateman, who was a hero, was a case in point. I go across to Jason Bateman, but he was director on Ozark, and that series was phenomenal. Not just the acting, the cinematography, everything. I couldn't fault it. But the directors and the production crew, everybody said about that production that it was just amazing to work on, because everybody was treated brilliantly, from the directors right down to the people that bought the catering. They were all part of a family, and it worked really well. And I think that shone through in the production. And if you have got a cast and crew who love what they're doing and feeling like they're part of a family, they are going to produce their best work. They're not going to produce their best work when they're being shouted and screamed at and bullied and sexually harassed and God knows whatever else.
Exactly.
It just doesn't work. So, that the better you treat people, the better your production piece is going to be. And I firmly believe in that.
100%.
Anyway, on that note, it's time for my favourite bit of the show. It's not my favourite bit of the show, because it's been really lovely talking to you, Nick. I'm not going to disrespect you. It's my second favourite bit. My card. It's time to get my cards out. Everyone knows, Nick, who's watched this show for a while, that I get a bit gooey over my cards, because they're really silky and soft and tactile, and they're like stress busters. So every time I get my cards out, it's like, my precious.
So while she's having her moment with her card, Nick, you are going to pick one of these cards, and you will discuss what's on the card, and try not to think with blinkers on. Just say whatever comes into your head first, even if it sounds totally ridiculous.
I'm glad you warned me.
Okay, we'll spread out my cards now. So I'll just run my finger along the top, and you just say stop when you want me to pick a card.
Stop.
Oh, okay, let's have a look. What did we get? Okay. Oh, this is an interesting one. We haven't had this before. It kind of links into what we were maybe talking about just now. The card is forgiveness. Okay, we're going to talk about forgiveness. So as we're creatives, next, we're going to ask you creatively about forgiveness. Nick, what does forgiveness mean to you? What does it look, feel, and sound like?
Forgiveness. I'm the sort of person who I'm a bit of a terror for this, because I have a bit of a habit of holding grudges, but I want to get out of that. So forgiveness is something that I want to do more of. I think forgiveness allows us to move on. It allows us to stop dwelling on things. I think I think that is what helps us move forward. I remember a talk that Chris Akabusi gave and said the past is for reference, not for residence. And I've tried to apply that where I can. But yeah, I think things like that. I think forgiveness helps you move on. It helps you live in the present more, and start to think ahead more than think behind, more than think of what's gone on before. So yeah, I think forgiveness is an important part of moving forward in life, and I'm kind of glad that that's come up, actually, because I do think it's a good note to self that it's something that I need to do more as well.
Yeah, you only harm yourself when you're looking back and holding a bitter thought about someone else. Yeah. What do you think it sounds like being a voiceover artist? If it had a sound, what would it be?
I think forgiveness is it's a sigh, but a happy sigh. I think that's how I think it sounds. I think in a lot of ways, I mean, I grew up on the autism spectrum. I wasn't formally officially diagnosed until I was in my 30s. So I had very poor social skills, and it took me a long time to process things, and I had no idea why. But when I got my diagnosis, I found that I was able to, it helped me make peace with a lot of my past. You know, I could look back on my young self and was like, I finally understand you. And yeah, I think that's, so yes, I think there's a happy side to that, and think now I can start to move forward.
Yeah, I can hear that. That's a fantastic answer, Nick, where you just, and you can relax, can't you? Because you just
Absolutely
go.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Oh, I love that. That's a beautiful way to end our show. I feel quite happy and peaceful now.
Oh, I'm glad I was able to give you that.
I do. Oh, thank you so much.
And you've been a very interesting person to talk to, because you just, as I said at the beginning, you're all over the place. You seem to have so many talents and skills.
Absolutely.
But yeah, you know, in this industry, you know, you've got to be able to do lots of different things. You know, I would really, you know, at some point, I'm going to need to learn how to do cartwheels, sword fight, maybe kind of how to dismantle a gun. So yes, there's just so much stuff to learn in this industry, and I'm a firm believer in being a lifelong learner as well, which you have to be in this industry. Yeah. And when you see all the cool stuff that you could learn, you'll want to be a lifelong learner too.
Absolutely.
I'm helping a friend of mine with her lines, and she's in a play that requires tap dancing. She's never tap danced in her life before. So yes, every time you take on a job, you're learning a new skill.
Absolutely.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Nick. Thank you so much for coming on the couch with us.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you too.
Oh, thank you so much, Nick. And thank you to our wonderful audience for tuning in and joining us as well. But we have to go. So until next time, we'll see you.